everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
What's happening, Rush Nation? Here we are. We're here with another set of start and sit-ins. Apologies for last week and not getting this one out the door. Travel, illness, and a few other bits and pieces kind of got in the way. So this is going to be quite a short podcast. You've had the Fantasy Football Bible. You've had everything else out this week. So I'm just going to go through just some basic start sits plays, which just build off the back of my rankings and what I've already sort of talked through. So for me, so sort of fringe play positions, I'm not going to name the ones that are studs and you should play every week. So let's start with the quarterback position. Brock Purdy for me is a must start this week. Great matchup. I said lots of points to be scored. The wide receivers have great matchups. If you haven't listened to the Fantasy Football Bible Part 2, you would have heard that. So yeah, absolutely brilliant matchup for him. Same goes for Jordan Love. He also sits in this category, and I know he was he's still coming back from injury, but he was phenomenal in that second half last week against the Vikings, 389 passing yards. And he has a great matchup with wide receivers having a great matchup this week. So I definitely see there's a great opportunity for him. And then also Justin Fields is another good option this week. I talked about maybe there's an opportunity to get at the defense and Mike Zimmer's defense in the Cowboys, because it's severely dropped off from the defense we saw under Dan Quinn. So I think you can look at him and say that he will be a top 12 fantasy quarterback this week with that matchup, especially if they can get some design runs going, because that looks likely. But I also like Geno Smith as well. That's another start for me that I feel pretty good on. That matchup against the Giants, they can really take control of that and go from there. If I'm looking at quarterbacks to sit this week, one I've already talked about, Patrick Mahomes. So already talked about how difficult this matchup is going to be, the lack of weapons. He hasn't topped 25 fantasy points since week 7 of last season. And now he's doing it with a diminished return. We've got the Saints that haven't conceded more than 15.2 fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. And they've had Dak Prescott, they've had Jalen Hurts. So they will wrap him up and they will contain him. So I definitely don't feel like Patrick Mahomes is a start option this week. Andy Dalton as well against Chicago. Chicago probably one of the best defenses in football right now. I'd definitely be staying away from there. The Bears have actually allowed the fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. And only one quarterback has top 10 fantasy points against them so far. And you think, oh, well, who do they play? Well, they've had CJ Stroud, they've had Anthony Richardson. So yeah, I definitely think that's one I'd be fading. And then the same goes with Derek Carr. So we've seen Justin Herbert and Kirk Cousins struggle against this D, and I think Derek Carr will be the same. I think he'll get yards. It's just I don't see there being many touchdowns. So they're ones I'm definitely fading. I look at the start options at running back. Chuba Hubbard talked about he's been on a real roll right now. And there's a really good matchup for him this week against Chicago. You can run against Chicago. And I do feel like this is a good opportunity. The Bears are 10th in most fantasy points allowed to running backs. So definitely think there's an opportunity there for him. Najee Harris have talked about. You should feel pretty good about him this week with Warren injured, Cordell Patterson injured as well. So I think you can see him have a really, really good week this week. Again, you can run the ball on Dallas. Mike Zimmer's defense is not as good as it should be. And then also Jerome Ford. So Jerome Ford is definitely a great option this week. He will be the lead back. The Washington Commanders are in the top 10 of most fantasy points allowed to running back. So should be a good week for Ford as they try and get some control of that one. If I look at some sleepers, a couple of guys I think you can look at. Kareem Hunt I talked about in the Fantasy Bible show. I think there's an opportunity here if they try and control this game against the Saints. They're going to need someone to, especially in the passing game, to help them out. And I think Kareem Hunt can definitely do that. I definitely think Javonte Williams is someone who could surprise. This week, the Raiders do give up a lot of fantasy points to running backs. At least 5 running backs this season have had 11 PPR points against them. So there's definitely an option for him to be a flex play. And Alexander Mattison, it's all trending towards Mattison getting in ahead of Zamir White. So it's definitely one I'd be watching. If I'm looking at backs to sit this week, one of them is Zamir White. I just don't think he's got the juice, and he's someone that's definitely on the verge of losing his job. Rico Dowdle as well against Pittsburgh. This is just not the matchup really to take advantage of. The Steelers are the second best team in football when it comes to fantasy points allowed to running backs. So that's definitely one to avoid. And then I kind of am on the fence with Zach Moss. I think Chase Brown is getting a lot more work, and I'm just a bit worried that he is someone that I'd be a bit careful of. So he's a potential bust candidate this week. Wide receivers to start this week. Jaden Reed, Deebo Samuel are both in my top 7 this week. Deebo Samuel's my 3rd. Jaden Reed, my 7th wide receiver this week. Deontay Johnson's up there as well. He's my wide receiver 6. So those 3 in particular are must starts this week. I think they all have great matchups that can be heavily exploited. And I really like the options of all 3 of those this week. I also think Amari Cooper has a really good matchup. I really like his matchup this week that can be exploited. I've got him in 21 in the rankings. Would not be surprised if he finishes above that. So I really like his options this week. If I'm looking at receivers to fade this week, it's a really hard one because I think, to be perfectly honest with you, with the injuries and then with what we've got at the, like what's going on in Miami and the bye weeks involved, like it'd be really easy to say like Jalen Waddle, yeah, sure, absolutely. I want to try and come up with some like different names. So Xavier Worthy is one I'm a little bit concerned about, just from a volume perspective. If they don't hit that deep ball, that's one that they can definitely take advantage of as well. So he's one I'm definitely a bit concerned about. I'm definitely thinking as well Keenan Allen. He's one that I'd be sitting this week. Jordan Addison has a really, really bad matchup, as the Tank Dell, especially since Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs have better matchups. They're the guys that I'd be looking to avoid this week. And yeah, just keep an eye on Tyreek Hill. That could be a really rough one. Tight ends, Tucker Kraft, I think, has an option this week to be relatively decent, as with Pat Freiermuth. So definitely feel free to start those. The sit ones has been a lot of movement towards Eric Hall this week on the waiver wire. He's someone I would probably not be sticking to this week. I just think it's a flip between him and Kazeki, and they'll kind of strangle each other. And then also Brenton Strange. I do think that we're pretty close to Engram coming back, so I wouldn't be playing him this week. I also wouldn't be playing Dalton Schultz, Mark Andrews, and Hunter Henry. None of those are good matchups either. If we're looking at DSTs outside of like who's owned heavily, the Broncos scream to me as a good one, the Dolphins and the Vikings, and I'm definitely thinking they're probably your best options. And if you're looking for a kicker who's not widely owned, who should experience a good week this week, Jason Myers is one that I would definitely be going for. So he's one that I'm definitely looking at this week. So that's kind of where I'm at with the starts and sits. All that context should have been given to you. If you're sort of listening to this one, you haven't listened to Fantasy Football Bible, give that a check out, because I talk through every game. I talk through every game script, and I say where I'm at with games and how I view them, how Vegas is viewing them, how I think the game's going to break down. And then I talk about every player who I think is going to be fantasy relevant and where I have them ranked. So those 2 episodes really kind of set the tone for this one. This one kind of normally comes before, but the way that the week's gone, it's come out after. So give that a listen. And then, as I sort of put out in one of the last podcasts I did, join the Patreon. It's literally just a couple of pounds a month. And tomorrow night, I'm happy to go through some rosters and come up with some ideas on how to refresh rosters that are really struggling. And we can look at leagues and go through there. So you get exclusive access to me. So, feel free to join before Saturday night. And I will do what I can to look through some rosters and offer some guidance. And I tend to do this through voice notes. You get a really good understanding. That's going to do it for the rest of the week for here on 5 Yard Rush. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for all the love and support. And I look forward to hearing you all the success stories from week 5 as we head into week 6. And don't forget, as always, keep rushing.